Hello guys, and happy Vlogmas Day 11. We are almost done with Vlogmas Week 2, and that's crazy to me. But hello, if you're new here, my name is Marissa Nicole, and I've been doing YouTube since middle school. This is my second channel. Hopefully my other channel you guys will never find. It's not secret. There's still videos out there that are alive and well on the internet. And this year, my two best friends and I actually just started a podcast together called Kiss My Glass, and we've been having so much fun with it. It's one of the best things that I think I've ever done or started. I've enjoyed it thoroughly, and you guys have enjoyed it thoroughly, and it's only gonna get better from here because we've only been doing this since October, and with every episode we're genuinely getting better. If you listen to like the first episode and the last one, you will be able to see that. But it's been so fun for me as a creator to like learn a new platform. I feel like every time a new social media app comes out or new ventures along this line, like I'm really excited to learn about it. Like TikTok still somewhat confuses me, even like Instagram Reels or like Twitter Stories, like every day there's something new. And I've been wanting to do podcasting for at least like 2 years now. But here on my channel I posted a couple of videos of like maybe behind the scenes or informational stuff on how I do what I do. I already have a video on how I actually edit my intros or make my intros for my YouTube videos, as well as how I edit my actual YouTube videos. So if you guys are interested in that, you guys can check those out. I will link them down below. But adding to this kind of like mini how I do what I do series, I guess, I wanted to kind of walk you through the podcasting stuff, or at least what we're doing so far and how we do what we do now. I'm sure this will change in like a year when I learn how to do something better or something changes or new equipment or whatever it may be. So this video might get updated, but the same thing with intros and how I edit my videos. I'm always gonna be growing and learning, but I still hope that this video is helpful for you guys, especially if you're wanting to start a podcast, or maybe if you're still beginning and you just wanna know how to do something better or different, or if you're just curious on how this works. I love watching videos like this. Like I like my editing style. It changes every now and again, but I still love watching people's videos and how they edit, because I'm like, wow, I didn't even know that you could set keys on your Final Cut Pro keyboard, and I just like recently learned how to do that. So little things like that. I just hope this video is helpful for you, or at least entertaining if you're just curious on how podcasting works. But if you already do have a podcast, like do some selfless promo down in the comments down below. Let me know what your podcast is. I want to check it out. If you have like an Instagram, link it, because I love creeping on like podcast Instagrams. I think they're the best Instagrams in my own opinion. Or if by the end of this, if you have any questions about things that I do or how I do whatever, please let me know that as well. I'll be able to answer you guys or help you guys out. You can also DM me on Instagram. I love talking to you guys over there. So now I just kind of want to share how I do it. Of course, before you can actually record and, you know, create a podcast, you need to kind of come up with the basis of your podcast. What do you want it to be about? What kind of direction do you want to go in? Of course, you're going to need a podcast name. Let's start out with the basics of creating your podcast. When I was first thinking about actually starting the podcast this year, when I was going to actually sit down and make myself do it, it was originally just going to be a me thing, and it was going to be episodes that I would do by myself, sometimes have some guests on, or I would like to have more of my episodes having guests than not. And that was kind of the route that I was thinking of taking. And I was really happy with that, but then I started thinking more so of my own like insecurities, but also worries, which is stuff that you might want to take into consideration is, will you have enough guests? If you choose to do a podcast that would have guests, can you do that? How would you do that? Are they going to be people that you're going to bring into your, you know, recording space, your studio, whatever you want to call it, your bedroom? Do you have an extra mic for that person? Are you going to use microphones? If they're just going to zoom in, are you going to be recording off of the computer? Because the quality might not be that good. There's so many different factors that you might want to think about if you're deciding to do guests, which is what I was thinking about. And in turn, it just kind of overly intimidated me. And then I was like, never mind, I'll just do mainly episodes by myself, and every now and again have some guests that I could bring into my space. That way I can make sure the audio is perfect. But even with that, I was second guessing myself, because I already have, of course, this YouTube channel. And I'm like, what the hell would I talk about for 45 minutes to an hour alone? Like, I already listen to myself talk. You guys already listen to me talk all the freaking time. Like, what would I really bring to the table? And I'm sure that there's a lot. These are my thoughts that I'm hoping is helpful for you guys to hear. But that is what got me thinking that maybe a solo podcast or even like a guest podcast is not going to be the route for me, but it could be for you. You need to kind of figure that out. And that is when I landed on getting co-hosts, and I talked to my two best friends, Allison and Caitlin, and they were totally down for it. And that's essentially where we started, was deciding what kind of podcast I was going to be. Either a solo, a guest, an interview, a co-host. There's so many different avenues, and that's where I started. Once we decided on the actual co-hosting part of the podcast, that's when we actually started to sit down and think of names. I will say, from personal experience, you can listen to podcast episode 9 if you want to hear some of the tea. Please be diligent in figuring out your name. Make sure that it's not already taken. Make sure that it's not like copyrighted. Make sure that it's not something that already exists. And even if the podcast doesn't exist, like if you look it up on Spotify or whatever, still look it up in like an actual copyright database online. If you go online, there's like a governmental database that'll show you what's copyrighted, what you can and can't use and stuff like that. Like, go the extra mile to really figure out if this is okay, because you don't want to get so many episodes in, realize that your name is not able to be used, and then you're gonna have to change it and rebrand everything. That would be the worst thing to happen. In my head, when the podcast was just gonna be a solo thing and maybe some guests, I was already thinking of names for myself. myself, and I was talking to a bunch of my friends, and it was gonna be like margaritas with Marissa, or salt the rim, or grab a glass, stuff like that, because I'm very much known as a margarita drinker, tequila drinker, like, I don't know, it's just kind of funny and stuff like that on my channel. That's just me, and I wanted that to stay kind of on brand. However, I didn't want the same branding as my YouTube channel. Like, I didn't want my podcast to just be named Marissa Nicole. That was my own personal preference. Now, when my friends joined, we ended up on the name Kiss My Glass. It's a play on the grab a glass. However, it's more, I don't know, it has some spunk to it, has a little spark to it. It's like, kiss my glass. We just thought it was really funny. It's very much the vibe that we are, and we talk about ourselves in the podcast as being a shit show. So it's very on brand for us three as our podcast, and we absolutely love it. Once we had the logistics of the podcast, you know, dialed in, like the name and what kind of podcast we were gonna be, we wanted to, of course, talk about the equipment that was gonna be used to make the podcast. I will go ahead and say this right now that, of course, I am not the most knowledgeable person on like microphones, for example, or even cameras. Like, of course, I am very new into the audio side of things. I'm very familiar with the video side of things, like my cameras and my lenses and stuff like that I would need for YouTube. However, I did all my research watching literally 1,000 YouTube videos about the differences between different kinds of microphones, what kind of microphones I would want. I tried to look into what podcasts I listen to and see if I could find what kind of equipment they're using, but of course thinking about budget within all of this. So that should be something that you guys are heavily researching if you're thinking about creating a podcast. However, I will tell you what mic I have, and this is my microphone. It comes with this little stand, so it'll sit on your table like this. I usually have it up on my desk. I'll show you exactly what it looks like when I go down to sit down to record. This is an Audio-Technica AT 2005. I will link it down below. I bought mine off of Amazon. I also bought this foam ball off Amazon because this does not come with the mic. This is what the mic normally looks like, and then I bought this ball to go over top of it. It just helps to kind of absorb any kind of extra sound that I don't want picked up. And I will link this down below too in case you guys wanted to pick that up. So there's actually a small port right here that'll plug into my computer through a USB cable. That way I will be able to record my sound on my Mac here from the microphone. One reason why I decided on this mic specifically is because it actually is XLR compatible as well. Again, I'm not a huge audio tech. All I know is that this big port that has like the 3 prongs in it, that means that it would be able to plug in from here to basically like a box, and that is kind of what would record the sound. Essentially, it just makes the sound so much better. It's not running through your computer. That would be like the better option to do. However, then you have to buy like the box itself. There's a name for it. I don't remember off the top of my head. But right now I'm just using the USB option. But I decided on this mic because I know that it would have the potential to grow with me if and when I decided to kind of upgrade in that sense and start using that box to record my sound rather than my Mac. And if you've listened to the podcast, you'd be able to hear how this mic sounds on my voice, and I love it. I think it sounds amazing. I think it's great quality. And Allison and Caitlin had a much cheaper mic than the one that I picked out, and they had the same mic. And then Allison ended up upgrading to my mic because she liked the way that my sound sounded. And so now me and Allison are on the same mic, and Caitlin's still on her previous mic until she wants to upgrade. But for now, I probably, to the normal ear, you guys really can't hear the difference, but I edit all the episodes, and so I'm like, ooh, I can hear the difference between like my mic and Caitlin's mic. And so that's always interesting. The next piece of equipment, I guess you could say, that you might want to think about is where your podcast is going to be hosted or where you're going to keep it. Some people like to keep it on their website if you already have a website, and you can keep all that RSS feed on there. There are podcasts that are like specifically only on Spotify or only on Apple Podcasts or iHeartRadio or little things like that, if you've heard of that. But if you're like me and you're just trying to start out and you don't want to spend any money, because even when I started my channel in the beginning, I didn't spend money on anything. One way to also help keep this cheap that we do is we actually use Anchor to host our podcast. Now, this isn't sponsored like whatsoever. Your podcast lives on Anchor essentially, and then Anchor will distribute those to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever else that they want to distribute those to. They'll do it automatically and you don't have to worry about it. It is free to use, and you can still get monetized and essentially make money from the free app, which I think is great. I wanted to talk about Anchor specifically before I talk about even just editing software, because you can actually edit all of your episodes within Anchor. You can actually record your episodes within Anchor. If you wanted to use your phone if you're going through the app, or if you wanted to use your computer if you're going through the computer, you can record your episodes through Anchor itself, and then you can actually edit those audio files in Anchor, post them in Anchor, and like everything's done through Anchor, and it's all free. So if you guys are really trying to do it like cheap and just start out, Anchor is honestly the best way to do it. However, because I already have a background in YouTube and of course video editing, audio editing is different of course, but it's essentially the same, and I already have editing software, so I personally don't use the Anchor editing tools. I use Final Cut Pro. But we figured out the name, we figured out what kind of podcast we want to be, we figured out the equipment we want to use, where we're going to host our podcast. Now we can actually get into recording the podcast, and how do you do that? So I'm going to show you guys, of course, how my mic works. So I have my mic right here, and this cord that I'm holding in my hand is the USB cord. Essentially, I'm going to take my cord here, and it's going to get plugged into the bottom here where my cord gets plugged in. Of course, every mic might work a little bit differently, but this is how mine works. And at the other end is a regular USB cord. cord, which of course is going to get plugged in to my computer back here. I know when my mic is plugged in correctly because this blue light will light up. However, I made the mistake at first because this doesn't mean that it's on. I have to look at the switch right here that marks it's on right now. You guys probably can't see that versus when it's marked off. The light will still be on, and I messed up during one episode and had my mic turned off because I thought the light told me it was. So make sure you just know how your mic works. You read the instructions, whatever it may be, and know that it's turned on. This next tip is specific to my mic. So you want to make sure you know what mic you have. If it's like a cardioid versus a figure 8, which basically means like where is it picking up the audio from. My mic specifically, I always set up right in front of my face, and I want to make sure that I'm talking into the top of the mic. And so if you're looking at me from the side, this is where I talk into my microphone, and this is usually how close I am to my microphone. Some mics will pick up sound better if you're talking into the side of the mic. So you just want to make sure you know what mic you have and like where you need to have your mic for you to get the best sound. I am actually about to record an episode. It's a solo episode that I'm recording that is actually already up if you guys wanted to go listen to it. I'm spilling some tea, some secrets about being a YouTuber and what it's like being a YouTuber, especially during Vlogmas, like talking about how much money I make, how brand deals work, all that kind of fun stuff. You guys asked me a ton of questions on my Instagram, and on the episode that I'm about to record, I answer all of those. So if you want to go listen, I will link my podcast down below, of course. But since I'm recording a solo episode, I just need this mic and myself, and I'm basically good to go. However, when we record with all three of us for my podcast specifically, we are all in 3 different locations, especially during COVID. And what we do to kind of combat that is, of course, each of us have our own mics. All of our mics are plugged into our own laptops or computers that are recording their own audio file separately. So at the end of the episode, they send me their audio file. So I will have 3 separate files from myself, Allison, and Caitlin, all from the same episode. What we usually do to actually, talk to each other during the recording of the episode is I have my laptop out here. Allison will have her iPad, Caitlin will use her laptop, whatever it may be, and we will FaceTime each other on a different device than we are recording our audio from. That is important. And we will be using headphones to hear our conversation on FaceTime, so that way our mics aren't picking up the FaceTime call, and that is being done on a whole different device than what is recording our audio. The most important thing that you have to make sure that you do before you start recording an episode, and we are all guilty of this, myself, Allison, and Caitlin, we try to remind each other before we start recording now, is to make sure that your settings are correct on the device that you're recording the audio file on. So on my Mac here, I have to make sure that my settings are set to pick up my microphone. Now that I know that all my settings are correct, I'm ready to actually record my own solo episode that I'm going to go ahead and record right now. But also go ahead and listen to the podcast if you want to see how it goes, how my mic sounds, anything like that. This episode is already live, so you guys can check that out in the description box. But I'm going to record this episode now, and then I'll check back in with you guys and show you essentially how I quick edit the episodes and how I upload them, all that jazz. Oh my goodness, guys. Okay, so I just finished recording today's podcast episode. I was recording it for 1 hour and 22 minutes. That's pretty usual. Even with us 3, when we do it all together, they're usually pretty long episodes that I then have to edit down. But with it being 4:30, the sun is going down, so the lighting is going to start changing in a little bit, obviously, just to let you guys know. Let's dive in to editing and how to edit a podcast episode. Like I said before, I edit in Final Cut Pro, and that's just because I already know how to use the software, because that's what I use for video editing, and you can edit audio in there as well. Of course, first I'm going to input the audio in, which I already have down here. It's labeled episode 11, Marissa. When I'm editing audio, I can see this is going to be my audio file, and I can see where I'm talking because these waves are lifted. Anywhere where there's no waves means that I'm not talking. Now, essentially, I can go through, especially with this being a solo episode, and just rough cut it all and just cut out everything. Sorry, I got another text. Cut out everything where I'm not talking. However, when there's 3 audio files, I can't really do that because we are all talking at different points and it needs to be, aligned with each other. What I usually do is I cut the audio file along with my bass, so that way my bass moves with my audio file, because when I cut this where that line just was, I can delete that whole file and it all moves together. Now, for example, if I only want to cut the audio, I could cut here and then I could cut here where I need to, and then when I delete that file stays over here and I have to constantly drag everything over, which to me is annoying. So that's why I cut the bass as well. It just kind of streamlines it for me, so I just highlight both and then I will cut the file where I want it to end, and then I cut the file where I want it to start, and then I can delete the bass and everything moves with it, and it makes it a lot quicker for me to edit. You can do this in iMovie for free, you can do it for Final Cut Pro, you can do it in some app on your phone, you can do it on Anchor for free. There's so many ways to edit, and different apps or softwares might work a little bit differently, but that is essentially how I edit, and it does take a long time because essentially you have to listen to the entire episode. This one's not going to take me nearly as much because it is a solo episode and I can essentially just cut out all those, blank parts. But if you guys want to see how I edit, I guess a 3-part podcast, let me know in the comments. I can always do an updated, at least throw it in a vlog, here's how I edit, and it's not gonna be a whole video on it, but it's hard to show you without the 3 audios, but this is how I edit. At least this solo episode is so much easier than than doing multiple different audio files, because you have to make sure they all line up, they all are on the same, you know, pace. When she's laughing and she's talking, they're not overlapping, or if someone needs to cough over someone else is talking, I have to mute that audio file. Like, there's a lot more that goes into it, and it does take a little bit longer. The solo one will not take me as long, but I do edit the solos and the full podcast the same way. With that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and edit this podcast episode because it does have to go up tomorrow, so I'm gonna have to edit it right now, and then I will pop back in to kind of show you guys how we wrap it up, actually publish it to Anchor and kind of like show you the full deal. That way you guys get a full look on how like you create, record, and publish a podcast episode. It has been quite some time later. If you're curious, it's about 7:08 and I just finished editing the podcast. I think I told you guys that I was at like maybe an hour and 20 minutes. I was able to get it all the way down to 40 minutes after editing, and that's typically where I like to be, between like 30, 40, 45 minutes, and even on the solo episode, that's definitely even longer than I thought it was gonna be, but I'm happy with that. But I wanted to kind of walk you guys through what I do when I like save the episode and how I upload it, because especially if you guys are gonna use Anchor like I recommended, or the way that we use it, if you're gonna add sponsored segments or, you know, ad placements that you record within the app, then your file basically has to be cut into different parts, because you can add that segment in between file parts. So this is how I do that. Essentially, I have like intro, outro music, and I also have transitional music within the podcast that I created. This file right here is my transitional music, and as you can see, it kind of ends right here. It doesn't overlap with the other audio as it normally would, because essentially our podcast goes in like an intro, kind of like an updatey way, then we transition into a game that we play, and then we transition into the podcast episode. So there will be transition music between our updates and our games, and then between our games and our actual content. However, the transition between the game and the content will be an ad break, and so that kind of works a little bit differently. However, we didn't do an update and we didn't really do a game within this episode, so I just kind of put the ad break in the middle of the episode. And so I have my transitional music stop and end, and then what I do is essentially I select everything after that transition music break, and then I'm going to copy it, that's important, and then I'm going to delete it. And I know that sounds really scary, but that's how I do it. And then I have up until this section is about 16 minutes long, and I'm gonna go ahead and save this as a master file, and I'm gonna title it, just to keep myself straight, episode 11 part 1, and I save that. And in essence, once that saves, all I'm gonna do is re-add that ending piece that I deleted and delete the beginning piece and save part 2. That way I have 2 separate files for my podcast. Now that I have saved 2 of my files, I'm essentially gonna go to my Anchor profile, as you guys see here. For Kiss My Glass, I can click on a new episode and it's gonna pop up the page where I can upload my files. So I'm gonna grab my part 2 and drag it in there, and I'm gonna drag my part 1 and drag it in there. And then I'm gonna make sure that I put them in the right order. That's an important part. And then this button will pop up that I can add my sponsored segment. And I wanna put it in between those 2 files, so that way it actually lines up with where I want it to be. Where that music's gonna start, it's gonna fade out, the ad will come in, stop, and then my episode will continue as such. So making sure that it's all like, you know, in order is the most important part. And once this is done, you know, like uploading and processing and rendering or whatever, I can of course update the title, the description, add up all my details. I can schedule the post to go live, which I'm gonna do, making sure that it goes live tomorrow. And that's essentially it. That is from beginning to end how to create, record, and publish or post your podcast. As you can see, there is some work that goes into it, especially the actual recording and editing part. And I hope that this video was helpful for you to, I guess, maybe see how I do it, or maybe how much work does go into it, or I at least hope it was entertaining for Vlogmas. Let me know what you guys want to see next in this little mini series of like how I do things, because I love this and I hope that it's helpful for you guys. So what do you guys want to know next? Let me know in the comments down below, and I can definitely make that for you guys. But I love you guys so much, more than you'll ever know, and I will see you in the next video. Bye. Don't forget to check out Kiss My Glass podcast. Okay, bye.